You ever agree to something way too fast, only to regret it the second you show up? That was me, standing in the doorway of a way too nice Airbnb outside San Diego, holding a duffel bag and wondering how I got roped into this. Bachelor party weekend. 10 guys, 2 nights, 1 house, and apparently only 7 beds. Dude, Adam said when he saw me, already half drunk in a tank top and sunglasses even though it was pushing 9 p.m., "You're bunking with Jordan, hope that's cool." Jordan. I hadn't seen him in years. Not since college. We weren't exactly friends, but we weren't enemies either. He ran in different circles: varsity baseball, frat parties, loud laughter, and louder opinions. I was more the low-key guy who stuck to studio art classes and kept his headphones in. Still, we'd had a few classes together. He was one of those people who always remembered your name, even if you barely talked. Now here he was, walking out of the kitchen with a beer in one hand and a Red Bull in the other, looking way too good for someone surrounded by bags of chips and a half-eaten pizza. "Mark?" he said, that same easy grin on his face. "No way." "Hey man," I said, forcing a casual tone. "Been a while." "Like 5 years," he said, pulling me into one of those bro hugs. "Guess we're roomies this weekend." Adam tossed a key at him. "Room at the end of the hall." "You guys got the quiet one. Lucky." We both walked down the hall, and I tried not to notice how Jordan's shoulders filled his shirt out like it had been tailored. When he opened the door, we both stopped short. There was one bed. A queen. He scratched the back of his neck. "Well, this is going to be cozy." I laughed a little too quickly. "I can take the floor if it's weird." "Please." "I've shared tighter quarters during baseball trips," he said, already tossing his bag near the closet. "Unless you snore like a lawnmower, we're good." I didn't, but I wasn't sure I could even fall asleep, knowing he was right there, probably shirtless, inches away. I took the side near the window. We changed without making it weird. He faced the wall. I kept my eyes on my phone, but I caught the glimpse of his back in the mirror, broad, tan, still stupidly fit. We climbed into bed without saying much. For the first 5 minutes, I lay there stiff as a board, staring at the ceiling. "You always this tense?" he asked, voice low in the dark. I turned my head. His eyes were already on me. "Just tired," he hummed. "You were always kind of quiet." "I remember that." "Yeah, well, not much has changed." He didn't reply. The silence stretched out, but it didn't feel awkward. Just heavy. The kind of heavy you get when something's in the air, but no one wants to say it. Then his foot brushed mine under the covers. Neither of us moved. The foot brushing mine felt accidental at first. I told myself it was just the way he had shifted in bed. But when it happened a second time, I couldn't ignore it. My pulse picked up, and I could feel the tension in the air turn electric, like a live wire passing through the narrow space between us. Jordan was lying on his back, staring at the ceiling, the dim glow from the streetlight outside casting shadows across his face. His hair fell slightly over his forehead, and for some reason I found myself studying it instead of trying to fall asleep. "Mark," he whispered after a long pause, his voice low, just above a breath. "You ever think about stuff like this?" I froze, trying to understand what he meant. "Stuff like what?" My voice came out tighter than intended. He shifted slightly, turning toward me now, his shoulder brushing mine. "You know, guys, situations. I don't know, weird stuff." I swallowed hard, caught completely off guard. Jordan, my old classmate, the guy I'd never expected to flirt with me in college, was this flirting? My mind raced as I tried to figure out the safest answer, or at least one that wouldn't make things horribly awkward. Yeah, I guess sometimes," I said, keeping it neutral, careful to avoid any inflection that might betray how fast my heart was beating. He hummed, almost like a sigh, and the small movement brought him even closer. The bed creaked under the shift, the quilt bunching where our hips nearly touched. I could feel the warmth of his arm grazing against mine. My brain screamed that I should move, that I should get up and stretch somewhere else. But something about the way he was lying there, calm, casual, yet teasingly close, kept me rooted to the spot. "You're warm," he said, almost innocently, but the low timbre of his voice carried a weight I couldn't ignore. "Yeah, well, it's a queen bed," I muttered, forcing a laugh that sounded thin even to my own ears. He replied, voice soft, almost thoughtful, like he was measuring how I reacted. His shoulder nudged mine again. A deliberate nudge this time. My stomach twisted in response, and I had to stop myself from leaning back instinctively. I wasn't supposed to feel this way. He was Jordan, a guy I had barely talked to in years, someone who had always seemed untouchable in his own confident, athletic way. And now here he was, inches from me, teasing, testing. I swallowed and tried to focus on the ceiling. Anything but him. But every time I moved slightly, he mirrored me, shifting just enough so that our arms brushed. My heart kept hammering, my mind whirling between panic and something else I couldn't name. "You always this nervous?" he asked again, his tone playful but low. "Even in college, you'd get all quiet when people talked too much." "Still the same?" I laughed nervously, trying to cover the heat creeping up my neck. "Yeah, some things don't change." His lips curved into that easy grin that I remembered from before, only now it felt more charged, like he knew something he wasn't telling me. "Good to know," he whispered, leaning just a fraction closer, so close I could feel his breath faintly on my ear. "I've always liked observing you. Quiet guys. You never know what they're thinking." My body tensed in ways I didn't expect. I could feel his hand shift slightly under the quilt, moving along the edge of my arm. Not gripping, just resting there lightly, sending sparks that I couldn't ignore. My thoughts scattered. This was insane. I didn't even know if he was serious or joking. But then he whispered again, right in my ear this time, a voice so low I could barely catch it. "Don't tell anyone, but I think about you sometimes." The words hit me like a punch to the chest. I wanted to react. I wanted to pull back, to say something witty, to deflect, to do anything except what I felt drawn to. Lean in, close the space, let him know I'd thought about him too. Instead, I froze. My breath hitched. The heat of the moment pressed in on all sides. I couldn't even form a coherent thought. The room was silent except for our breathing, heavy and uneven in the confined space of the bed. Every instinct screamed at me to move, to escape, but a smaller, louder voice, the one I wasn't ready to admit, told me to stay, to see where this went. Jordan's hand moved again, brushing mine lightly, testing, teasing. I swallowed hard, trying to maintain composure, but my chest was betraying me with every shallow breath. "You shouldn't," I started, voice barely above a whisper, then caught myself. What was I even saying? "You like it," he said, almost smugly, shifting so that our shoulders pressed together now. "Don't lie." I opened my mouth to respond, but the words got caught somewhere between my chest and my throat. I couldn't deny it. Couldn't even try. He smirked, sensing the admission, and shifted slightly closer onto the quilt. It was reckless, dangerous, completely unplanned. But for the first time all weekend, I felt an electrifying, undeniable thrill. The kind of tension that built slowly at first and then exploded, filling every nerve in my body. And there we were, two college acquaintances turned co-conspirators under the thin blanket of a single bed, each of us navigating the charged silence between curiosity, desire, and the unknown. I knew one thing for certain. Sleep was impossible now, and neither of us was planning to pretend otherwise. The room felt impossibly small now. Every sound, our breathing, the faint hum of the air conditioner, the distant laughter from the kitchen, seemed amplified. Jordan's shoulder pressed lightly against mine, just enough that I couldn't ignore it. I could feel his leg brushing mine under the covers, slow, teasing contact that made me acutely aware of my own body. My mind was screaming at me to stop overthinking, to just relax, but every nerve was on fire. "Mark," he whispered again, his lips barely brushing the side of my ear. "Do you ever think about it? Us?" I froze. The question was loaded, deliberate, and impossible to answer without betraying what I'd been trying to hide since we entered the room. I could feel his breath, warm and steady, tickling the back of my neck, and my pulse surged. I don't know, I stammered, my voice barely audible. Even as I said it, I realized how pathetic that sounded. I did know. I had been thinking about this since we walked into the house, since I first saw him drop his bag on the floor, since that first accidental touch under the quilt. Jordan shifted again, closer this time, the subtle movement sending sparks up my spine. His hand moved from his side, brushing gently along my arm. Not grabbing, not holding, just testing, teasing, tracing. Every brush left a trail of heat that made it impossible to think clearly. "You do," he said softly, a statement rather than a question. And the way he said it, with that confident, teasing edge, made my stomach twist. I couldn't deny it. Not to him, not with him so close, breathing close enough that I could feel the warmth on my skin. I swallowed hard, forcing words out that felt wrong but somehow honest. "Yeah," I whispered. "I do." A smirk tugged at the corner of his mouth, just a flicker, enough to show satisfaction without breaking the tension. Then, deliberately, he shifted once more, pressing just slightly against me, so close that my side and his chest were nearly touching. I could feel the weight of him, solid and warm, the subtle heat radiating under the quilt. I wanted to move. I wanted to pull back, claim the safe space of my side of the bed. But I couldn't. My body refused. Every instinct told me to stay, to feel, to let the tension linger a little longer before it snapped into something irreversible. "You're really quiet," he murmured, his voice low, intimate. "Always thinking, huh?" "Yeah, sometimes," I admitted, heart hammering, throat dry. "You know a lot of things." He let out a low chuckle that vibrated softly through the small room. "Yeah, I can tell." Then, with a deliberate slowness, he ran a hand lightly over my forearm again, tracing up to the elbow, not gripping, just touching, feeling. It was maddening, teasing, and completely overwhelming. I swallowed, my chest tightened. Everything in me screamed that this was dangerous territory, that a single misstep could make everything awkward forever. And yet, the pull between us was undeniable. Every small movement, every brush of skin, every whisper in the dark amplified the tension until it was unbearable. "Jordan," I started, unsure how to continue. We shouldn't." He cut me off with a soft laugh, almost mischievous. "Shouldn't what? Enjoy this moment?" I exhaled sharply, realizing he was right. There was no undoing the electric charge that had built between us since the moment we stepped into the room. And for the first time in years, I didn't want to undo it. Then, with a slow deliberateness, he shifted closer still, his chest now nearly pressing against mine. The quilt had bunched between us, forcing us into unavoidable contact. I could feel the heat radiating from him, the faint pulse of his heart, the warmth of his skin. Every nerve in my body screamed at me, and I realized, terrifyingly, that I wasn't going to stop this. He whispered again, closer now, almost brushing my lips with his. "You're thinking about it too, aren't you?" I didn't respond verbally. I couldn't. I just let the weight of him, the closeness, the undeniable pull sink in. Every rational thought had fled, replaced by a raw, immediate awareness of him and me, the impossibility of our situation, and the thrill of it all. The night was far from over, and the small, crowded room with a single bed had turned into something entirely different, a space charged with desire, unspoken words, and the dangerous possibility of something neither of us had expected. And neither of us wanted to stop. The room felt impossibly close now. Every movement made my heart race. Every breath I took seemed amplified in the small space of the queen bed. Jordan shifted again, and this time, it wasn't just a brush of a foot or shoulder, it was deliberate. His hand moved along my side, brushing under the edge of the quilt, and I could feel the heat of his skin through the thin fabric of my t-shirt. "Mark," he whispered, low, almost urgent, his lips dangerously close to my ear. Stop thinking. Just feel. I wanted to protest. I wanted to claim some sense of reason, to remind myself that this was reckless, that we didn't even know what the other felt fully. But every nerve in my body screamed otherwise. I could feel the pull, the tension, the raw anticipation between us. He shifted closer, chest pressing firmly against mine. His breath was warm, intoxicating, and the subtle scent of him, cologne mixed with the faint residue of the day's sweat, hit me like a shockwave. I wanted to pull away. I couldn't. And in that moment, something inside me snapped. Jordan's hand moved deliberately, tracing the line of my arm up to my shoulder, his thumb brushing lightly over my collarbone. The touch was gentle but deliberate, teasing, igniting something deep and urgent. I swallowed hard, my chest tight, as the reality of what was happening sank in. "You want this?" he asked softly, voice husky now, low enough that it felt like only I could hear it. I couldn't respond. Words were useless, inadequate. I nodded slightly, and that was enough for him. A small smirk tugged at the corner of his lips before he leaned in, brushing his mouth against mine. Just a brush, testing, gentle. But it sent a jolt straight through me, and I found myself leaning in without thinking, my hands rising instinctively to his shoulders. The kiss deepened slowly, teasing at first, almost hesitant. But it carried a weight, an electricity that made everything else in the room disappear. I could feel his body press fully against mine, the heat and proximity leaving no room for distance. The quilt had bunched up, trapping us close, forcing every inch of our torsos together. He pulled back just enough to catch my gaze, eyes dark and intense, searching mine like he was confirming that I wanted this as much as he did. My heart pounded so hard I thought he could hear it, and I could see the same mixture of nervousness and desire mirrored in his expression. "Good," he whispered, and that single word made my chest tighten even more. His hand moved lower now, brushing along the side of my torso, lingering just enough to make the air between us sizzle. I let out a shallow breath, unable to stop the tremor running through me. I wanted to say something, anything to break the tension, but Jordan shook his head slightly, brushing his forehead against mine. "Shh. Just relax. Don't think." So I didn't. I let myself feel the warmth, the closeness, the undeniable desire that had been building since we walked into the room. Our bodies pressed together, hands exploring cautiously, testing boundaries without words. Every brush of skin, every subtle movement left a trail of fire, and I realized I didn't care about being cautious anymore. Hours, or maybe minutes. I'd lost track, passed in a haze of breathless touches and stolen kisses, the world outside the bedroom completely forgotten. The tension that had been simmering since we first laid eyes on a single bed finally erupted into something uncontainable. And in that moment, neither of us cared about rules, logic, or consequences. The night had become ours. Reckless, electric, unforgettable. The hours seemed to blur together. My mind, my body, everything was lost in the warmth of Jordan's touch, the quiet urgency that pulsed between us. We didn't speak much. There was no need. The way he moved, the way his body molded against mine, told me everything I needed to know. His hands were gentle but firm, exploring with the kind of certainty that made my heart race even faster, the tension in the room palpable, suffocating. At some point, the last of the barriers between us crumbled. The quilt was discarded on the floor, forgotten in the wake of our urgent need to feel each other, skin against skin. It wasn't like anything I'd expected. It was better, more chaotic, more raw than I could have imagined. We were both inexperienced in this, and yet, in some strange way, it felt natural, like it was always meant to be this way, even if we didn't have the words for it. Jordan's lips found mine again, soft at first, but with increasing intensity, as if we were both trying to devour each other. The weight of him pressed me deeper into the mattress, his body moving in perfect rhythm with mine. It was reckless, stupid even. But in that moment, I couldn't bring myself to care. Everything else, all the doubts and the fears, seemed miles away. The only thing that mattered was the heat between us, the way his breath hitched with every movement. I felt him, every inch of him. The way his fingers traced down my chest, the way his body pressed against mine, the warmth of his breath against my ear. It was intense, electric, the kind of connection I had never experienced before. And the way he was looking at me, his gaze dark and full of something I couldn't fully understand but desperately wanted to explore. He didn't need to say anything. His eyes said it all. I wasn't sure how long we stayed like that, lost in the moment, tangled in the sheets, hands roaming, hearts racing, but eventually the intensity slowed. Our breaths began to level out, but the silence between us was charged. I didn't want to speak. I didn't want to break the fragile cocoon we had created. But then, as if he sensed the shift, Jordan pulled back slightly, lifting his head to meet my gaze. He was breathing heavily, his eyes searching mine, and for the first time there was a trace of uncertainty in his expression. "You okay?" he asked, voice softer now, but still tinged with that rawness from before. I nodded, trying to steady my breath. "Yeah, just wow." I managed a small laugh, but it didn't fully mask the chaos of emotions that were flooding me. He smiled, but it was more of a half smile, like he was still processing everything that had just happened. "Same here," he murmured, running a hand through his hair. For a few moments, we lay there, side by side, both of us staring up at the ceiling. The room felt suddenly too quiet. The adrenaline that had been coursing through me was fading, replaced by a strange feeling I couldn't quite place, like the calm after a storm, but with an undercurrent of something else. Then the silence was broken by the sound of a door opening. "Yo, you guys up?" Adam's voice came from the hallway, followed by footsteps getting closer. The moment was shattered. I shot up in a panic, scrambling to cover myself with a quilt. Jordan did the same, his face flushed, eyes wide. "Just a sec," Jordan called, his voice just a little too high, too frantic. Adam didn't answer, but his footsteps lingered for a moment before he finally walked away, the sound of the door to the living room closing behind him. We both let out a collective breath, but neither of us moved. For a few moments, it was as if time had stopped entirely. Neither of us spoke. The weight of what had just happened hung between us, thick and undeniable, like we had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. I glanced over at Jordan, my heart still pounding in my chest. His expression was unreadable for a moment, but then his lips curled into a slow, teasing smile. "Well, that was unexpected," he said, the tension in his voice replaced by something lighter. "Yeah," I agreed, running a hand through my hair. "Definitely didn't see that coming." We both laughed quietly, the absurdity of the situation hitting us at once. The idea of us, just a couple of college acquaintances, paired together for a bachelor party, ending up like this, seemed almost impossible. And yet, here we were, tangled in the aftermath of what felt like a moment of complete madness. I shifted uncomfortably, unsure what came next. What were we supposed to do now? Was this just a one-time thing? Something we'd pretend didn't happen once the weekend was over? Or was there more to it? Something deeper? Something that neither of us had the courage to fully explore yet? Jordan sat up, stretching, and then turned toward me with a look that was half amused, half serious. "You know this could be awkward. I don't know how much of that you remember." I nodded, feeling a mixture of relief and unease. "I remember everything." "Good," he said, his smile softening. "Me too." We both looked at each other for a moment. And something shifted. The playful tension from earlier had morphed into something else, something I couldn't quite name, but felt deep in my chest. Just as we were about to say something else, there was another knock on the door. Guys? You alive in there?" Adam's voice was louder this time. Jordan shot me a look, and we both jumped out of bed, quickly scrambling to get dressed. "I guess this is where we act normal," I muttered, pulling my shirt over my head. "Yeah." Jordan agreed with a half smile, his eyes glinting with a mix of mischief and something I couldn't quite place. Act normal. The next morning, the air in the Airbnb was thick with the smell of leftover pizza and spilled beer. Sunlight streamed through the blinds, casting stripes across the floor and onto the bed where Jordan and I had slept. Well, sort of slept. I avoided looking directly at him at first, remembering how close we'd been the night before. "Morning," he said quietly, voice low but teasing. He leaned back against the headboard, arms crossed, still half in his clothes from last night. His hair was messy, falling into his eyes, and I had to fight the urge to reach out and brush it back. "Morning," I replied, trying to sound casual, though my chest was still tight, and my stomach churned with a mixture of anticipation and nerves. We ate breakfast in the kitchen with the rest of the group. Eggs, toast, coffee, and the kind of awkward silence that comes after a night of too many drinks and too little sleep. I caught Jordan's eyes across the counter once or twice, each glance loaded with unspoken words and the memory of last night's touches. We tried to act normal, talking about the day's plans, joking with the others, but the tension lingered, an invisible thread connecting us that neither of us wanted to acknowledge openly. I could feel his presence whenever he was near, the heat of him brushing against me when we reached for the same plate, the subtle friction of our legs as we squeezed past each other in the hallway. After breakfast, the group decided to hit the pool. I found myself with no choice but to join, and I tried to keep my distance from Jordan at first, hanging back, pretending to be interested in the cooler full of drinks. But of course, he noticed. He never missed a beat. "You're avoiding me," he said, leaning casually against the edge of the pool. Water dripped from his hair, glistening across his shoulders and chest. The sight made my pulse jump. "I get it, but we're not kids anymore." I laughed nervously. "I'm not avoiding you, just pacing myself." He smirked, stepping closer until his arm brushed mine in the water. The current of electricity from the contact was instant, and I had to swallow hard. "Sure, pacing yourself," he said, voice low, teasing, making me aware of the hard truth. Nothing about last night was over, not in my mind, not in his. The rest of the morning passed in a haze of sun, drinks, and games, but every glance, every accidental touch reminded me of the line we had crossed and the tension that was far from resolved. Later, as the group settled back into the living room, Adam called out for everyone to get ready for dinner. Jordan and I ended up side by side on the couch, just slightly too close for comfort. I could feel the heat radiating off him, the faint brush of his knee against mine. It was maddening, and I struggled to keep my composure, to act like everything was normal. "You okay?" he whispered, leaning toward me under the guise of reaching for a snack. His fingers brushed mine deliberately, and I couldn't suppress the shiver that ran through me. "Yeah," I muttered, voice tight. "I'm fine." He raised an eyebrow, smirking. "You're lying. I can tell." I wanted to argue, to distract myself, but the truth hung between us. He wasn't going to let me hide, and, frankly, I didn't want to. Not entirely. The night ended with a few more drinks, laughter, and the inevitable chaos that comes with a bachelor party. When we finally returned to the Airbnb, everyone else crashed in their rooms, leaving Jordan and me alone again in the single queen bed. Neither of us said anything at first, but the unspoken agreement was clear. Last night had happened. It wasn't a mistake. And now, we had to navigate the weekend knowing it. He climbed in first, lying on his side, facing the wall, giving me space but not enough to ignore the tension. I settled in beside him, trying to act casual, but the memory of his touch, his breath, his lips, it was impossible to push out of my mind. "You thinking about it again?" he whispered, voice low, teasing, but with an undercurrent of something heavier. I hesitated, then admitted softly, "Yeah." A small laugh. "Me too." And just like that, the room was alive with the same heat, the same electricity from the night before. Neither of us could sleep. Not really. Not while lying next to each other, hearts racing, bodies aware, unspoken desires simmering just beneath the surface. This weekend had become far more dangerous than I had ever imagined, and neither of us wanted to stop. By the third night of the bachelor party, the tension between Jordan and me had become unbearable. Every laugh in the kitchen, every brush of hands while passing snacks, every accidental touch in the hallway, it all reminded me that last night wasn't a one-time thing. Neither of us could pretend it hadn't happened, And both of us knew it. After everyone else had gone out for drinks at a nearby bar, we were left alone in the house. The silence hit differently this time. It was heavy, almost suffocating, yet the anticipation hung between us, thick and impossible to ignore. We ended up back in the room together again, both of us too aware of the queen bed and the way it forced closeness. Neither of us spoke at first, but the air was buzzing with unspoken words. He climbed in first, lying on his side, giving me just enough space to pretend I could sleep. I sat on the edge for a moment, pretending to tie my shoes, my mind racing. Then, slowly, he turned his head toward me. "You're not going to sit there all night, are you?" His voice was low, teasing, but there was something in it that made my chest tighten. I shook my head, trying to act casual, but my hands trembled as I got into bed. Every movement was deliberate, every breath amplified. And then, as if on cue, our knees brushed under the sheets. Sparks of heat and electricity shot through me, making it impossible to ignore the connection between us. "Mark," he whispered, so softly I almost didn't hear it. "Don't think. Just feel." I nodded, my throat tight. His hand moved lightly along my arm, tracing up to my shoulder. My own hands went instinctively to his chest, feeling the warmth of his skin under the thin fabric of his t-shirt. Our bodies pressed together naturally, almost as if the bed was made for this exact moment. And then he kissed me, just a soft brush at first, tentative, testing the waters. But I leaned into it, heart pounding, lips moving against his, discovering a rhythm we hadn't known we were both desperate to find. The kiss deepened quickly, urgency building, and soon all pretense of caution was gone. Every touch, every brush of skin was electric. The world outside the bedroom ceased to exist. Only him, only me, only the small queen bed between us, forcing closeness that was both maddening and exhilarating. His hands roamed carefully, deliberately, and I responded instinctively, mirroring every movement, every gentle tease. We paused for a moment, foreheads pressed together, gasping lightly, the weight of the weekend and everything unsaid hanging in the air. His eyes met mine, dark and searching, asking questions words couldn't convey. I answered them with a small nod, barely perceptible, but enough to let him know I was there, completely. And then the teasing turned bolder. Fingers brushed where they shouldn't, touches lingering longer than socially acceptable. Every nerve in my body was awake, buzzing, aware. The thrill of the forbidden, the excitement of finally crossing the line coursed through me. "Mark," he breathed, lips just above mine. "You feel that too, right?" I didn't need to answer. I just pressed closer, letting the warmth, the tension, the desire consume me. The boundaries of friendship, of old acquaintances, of bachelor party etiquette, all fell away in that instant. The room was charged with electricity, with fire, with the undeniable truth that we couldn't go back to the way things were before. Hours, or what felt like hours, passed in that tangled, breathless haze. Every touch, every kiss, every heated glance cemented the bond that had been building since we first stepped into that cramped room. When we finally drifted into a restless sleep, it was only because exhaustion claimed us, not because the tension had dissipated. And even as I closed my eyes, I knew that nothing about this weekend, or about us, would ever be the same again. The final morning of the bachelor party arrived with the kind of sunlight that burned gold through the blinds, casting everything in a soft, unforgiving light. I woke slowly, muscles aching from the night before, the memory of every touch, every brush of skin still fresh, still tingling. Jordan was still next to me, asleep, his arm draped casually over my chest, body warm and impossibly close. I stayed still for a moment, watching him, my mind replaying the weekend, the kisses, the touches, the laughter, and the awkward moments between. Part of me wanted to move, to pull away and pretend last night had been a fleeting mistake. But another part, the larger part, didn't want to, not at all. Jordan stirred, letting out a soft groan and shifting slightly, his face turning toward me. His eyes opened slowly, dark and intense, and for a heartbeat, the world narrowed to just the two of us in that small, sunlit room. "Morning," he whispered, voice hoarse, almost shy in a way I hadn't expected. "Morning," I replied, careful to keep my voice steady even though my chest was hammering. The quilt was tangled around our legs, forcing more contact than we'd probably planned. Every brush of skin sent sparks up my spine. We lay there for a few moments in silence, not sure who would break it first, both of us caught in that delicate in-between space of desire and uncertainty. The air was heavy, with everything left unsaid, the tension of the weekend compressed into the quiet of the morning. Finally, he shifted, sitting up and running a hand through his hair. "So, wow," he said, his voice a little unsteady. "This weekend, that was intense." I nodded, unable to stop the small smile that tugged at my lips. "Yeah, definitely not what I expected when Adam said we'd be sharing a room." He laughed softly, a little breathless, and the sound sent another jolt through me. "Yeah, definitely not what I expected either. But I don't regret it. Neither do I." I admitted, and for the first time, I let myself feel it fully. The thrill, the connection, the strange, exhilarating bond we'd created over the last 2 days. We got up, showered, and dressed, trying to act normal as the other guy started stirring and packing. But everything had shifted between us. There were small glances, lingering touches, brushes of hands that weren't accidental. Every move reminded us both that something had changed. Before we left the Airbnb, Jordan pulled me aside in the hallway, just out of earshot from the others. "Hey," he said, voice low, serious, and a little unsure. "About everything. Last night. I just wanted to say, I'm glad it happened. But I don't want things to be weird, you know?" I nodded, feeling a warmth spread through my chest. "I get it. And yeah, I'm glad too. But yeah, let's not make it awkward. We can figure it out." He smiled, that mischievous half-smile that had haunted me all weekend. "Yeah, figure it out." As we drove back from the Airbnb, the group joking and teasing in the front seats, Jordan and I shared a quiet glance. A small, knowing smile. The weekend had been chaotic, intense, and completely unexpected. But somehow, it had also been the start of something that neither of us could ignore. And for the first time in years, I felt like the world had shifted just a little. Like a line had been crossed into something new, something dangerous and thrilling, and I wasn't ready to look back. The bachelor party was over, but for Jordan and me, it felt like the real adventure was just beginning.